Hi everybody, it's MxRheyRhey and welcome back to my art channel where we learn side by side how art works. So I am feeling a little low today. Not gonna lie, my allergies frequently give me sinus infections, so I'm going through one right now and it's horrible. And like the side that sees the most light has a headache right now. So I thought today, instead of doing any kind of like portrait work, or well, I rarely ever do portraits, it's mostly landscape that I do. And besides any other kind of like landscape or like an actual like painting would go, I thought today would be a really good day to do a gouache study. So it's something I've been really meaning to like dig deeper in figuring out how it works. Mostly right now how I'm working with it is I basically just use it like watercolor, and I feel like that's not fully grasping how gouache works. You know, it's not a watercolor, it just is also water based like a watercolor. It's just more opaque, it has its own properties and everything like that. So I thought today we could learn together some of how gouache actually works. So I know that it takes a lot of work to get like layering and water consistency right on there, so that's something I want to work with. I want to see how it works well with other mediums. I have some gel pens and some micron pens that I want to use for outlining, and I want to see how well they work under and over gouache paint. Some things I do know about gouache is that unlike watercolor, it has some properties with it where if you are working in layers, you go from lightest layer to darkest layer in an opaqueness kind of scale. It's sort of like the rule for oil painting, fat over lean. So when you start a painting, you want it with the most amount of like fast drying mediums and turpentine possible, because those dry the quickest, and then layer by layer you continually like lessen the medium use that you use to where it's almost fully oil, depending on how you work with oil paints, because oil paint by itself takes forever to dry. Like, it's no exaggeration, it could take a year sometimes for oil paintings to dry. So that's why you want to work with the thinnest medium, or the thinnest layers first, and then thicken the consistency as you go with oil. I hear that it's the same for gouache, so I want to try that out. And before I ramble on any further, because it kind of feels like that's where I'm going, let's just get our supplies and we'll talk through all of this together. So mainly I have my Himi gouache set, which I think is even just from reviews, really good gouache for learning to work with it, and I like this a lot better than my first set that I ever got, which was the Reeves gouache, which was a little hard for me to handle. These are my Arteza Gel Pens in a vintage palette. These are part of the pens I was talking about that I wanted to use for outlining, so we'll see how they work with this gouache. I have my micron pens here. I think these are, I don't think they're alcoholic ink. I think they're Pigma, so I think they're like pigment-based inks in a pen. And we are going into a new study pad for those of you who are new here. The Strathmore 300 series watercolor paper. Watercolor paper is the best paper to work with gouache in. Sometimes I use mixed media. I like personally a smooth paper, but this watercolor paper I was using to learn like techniques, styling, studies, everything like that. But I am done with my page ever since I showed how I made paper and wanted to do a comparison. That video is up on my channel already, I believe. We're done with this sketchbook. Watercolor paper. It's kind of a sketchbook. And so we are starting a new sketchbook study of 2021. Study of 2021. I don't feel right folding that. So let's get this out of my way right here. Let's just go with stuff and then we'll see how it works from there. Let me open this. Some of these need to be re-wetted because it's been a second. I think this will give me a good opportunity to use colors that I haven't used normally anyway. Actually, yeah, let's just re-wet this. We're going to need the use of white. Prussian blue, which is this really dark one, always pretty much stays really wet anyway. So while those are soaking in the moisture, add some to this white. They're just ones that look super dry. Okay, we're good. Okay, so let's set those aside. I love the palette that comes with this. It just makes me feel like I have less things to put away. And let me do a bit, okay, you guys, sorry I shook you guys. Let me do a little bit of labeling to make this seem kind of like organized and academic, and it's not, but we can learn together. What am I missing? I feel like I'm missing brushes. All my watercolor brushes are synthetic, but it's the grade of synthesis that varies. So I have the Winsor Newton Cottman set of brushes. I have the Artist Loft level 1 watercolor brushes, synthetic, but they're made to look natural. And then I have like an actual natural brush. It's just a fan brush. This, according to Michael's, a level 3, so it's like a professional level brush. Okay, so let's start with the ones that I use the most, which are the Artist Loft ones because of watercolor. Okay, that's fully dunked. So super wet brush with very watery gouache, acting like an opaque watercolor. Exactly like it. A damp brush. I had to clean it out and now it's slightly damp. Let's get somewhere in the middle between the pigment and the water. Okay, not bad. I feel like I have to push the color around. So then let's try the slightly damp brush with the watercolor like gouache. Well, like watercolor wise, I guess a little better. Let's get this little dry bit that I forgot. Okay, so this is definitely a consistency in gouache that I see often, and this is still a slightly damp brush. Slightly damp. I feel like this is a 1-to-1 consistency between water and pigment. Let's put this right here. Ooh, that's creamy. I can get a solid wash on this. That's nice. Let me add water to the brush. It's very wet, so the color is spreading. Yeah, so this makes it, obviously, the more water you add, the more transparent. Working with a wet brush versus a drier, damp brush. Actually, you know what? Let me get a small, let's do better bristles. I've worked with that one, obviously. I've worked with this one too, but so much so that the tin fell off. So this is a fully dry brush. Let's pick up some gouache. I think we're back to the 1-to-1 consistency. Ooh, that is some dry marking. I'm not a big fan, to be honest, of the dry mark. I feel like I'd have to work with the paint so much that it's like hard to work with. Dig into this top a little bit and see if we can go full pigment. Let's see what full pigment, no water does on a slightly damp brush. There's the little dry stroke technique, but because it's slightly damp, I think I can work with moving the pigment around. Let's try, okay, so I have to try the flat brush with this one just because it's like the shortest bristles that I have. Let's go with a full wet brush with the 1-to-1 ratio. I am definitely pushing everywhere, and I can feel like I can go for longer this time. Let's work with a little bit of the moisture taken away. 1-to-1, and then I'll add some water to see. Oh, okay, so we're starting to get the dry stroke with this one now. Let's get some water right here. Here's definitely the watercolor-like consistency. Let's dampen it a bit, get more into the pigments. Okay, there we go. I'm still getting that crisp line, but when you have water in this brush, but it's more pigment than it is water, you get like a really, really saturated wash. Let's see what that looks like with a slightly damp, holds a lot of water brush. There we go. Yeah, no, it actually acts like paint that doesn't want to move. I didn't, but I want to add water so bad. And then this one, the fan brush just says Elite, doesn't it? Oh, Princeton. It's an Elite Princeton brush. It does not look like this brush holds a lot of water, or like a ton of water. Let's try dry first, because this is pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio. Not a lot. You can't really go far. So 1-to-1 ratio, super wet brush. Much better, obviously. So much better. Let's do heavy pigment. I can really only work with this so much. Okay, it takes a little while to get to that dry brush scratch. Let's move on to a blending. I want to get into this green. Let me switch to my Cotton Brown, because I think I liked that one the best so far. This is also me learning about my personal preferences with gouache. Like, it's a study of the physicality of the paint and technique, as well as figuring out how I like to paint with gouache, because it's something I would like to do. I wonder what would happen if I worked on a wet on wet technique with this, actually, because I'll do a strip to see how blending goes. So I think blending on this when it's super wet is probably gonna help. Clean my brush. Let me add water right here. See, I can see it wanting to blend in with the water right there, so that's pretty cool. Try to break up. I was having such a hard time with the white paint. Oh, this is gonna be hard because I'm left-handed too. Okay, gosh darn it. Okay, so start there and blend upward and pull this way. Yes, kitten, how can I help you? That's something, at least. Let me try and get a little more. Oh, that's the wrong white. Let me get a little more pigment in this, even though it's white, so you can't see it all that well. Kitten, do you want back outside? I just put you in. Grab a little of the shade. Let's go. And then I start doing little tiny circles to start getting it to blend a little more. So maybe it'll blend out smoother, but there's still a lot of green in my paintbrush, so maybe I have to look out for that. Yes, kitten? No matter what, it's gonna look green because the green will overtake the white. I'm just adding a tint to it is what the white will do. My cat wants back outside. Yes, kitten. I feel like I'm doing this wrong, but technically that's a gradient. This is not the best gradient. I'm not learning how to do gradients. I'm just trying to see how it works. Now let's just do green. Green into transparent. Yeah, green. Do little circly circles to pull what I want out. Bloomed a little, but a gradient like that on a wet on wet technique is a lot easier to do. I'm working with gouache. I have to remember I'm working with gouache. This is definitely a strip. Clean my brush really quickly so it's not sopping. Dry it up a bit. Let's get into this purple. That is the 1-to-1 ratio. Working quickly like I did with water, the watercolor. It should be more darker this way. There's a clear divide in here and I'm not sure how to remedy it. I feel like just dropping water in the in-between and then playing with the pigment. So let's spread that out a little. Clean the brush off, add some green, work my way back down while it's wet. There we go. That was a few steps in between, but now I feel like I need to get rid of some water because it's very wet. Come on, let me add purple back into this. Jeez. This is not watercolor. I'm still acting like this is a watercolor. I'm just realizing. But the gradient is a gradient. It looks like a gradient. It just took me a few steps to get there. I can label these because they're off to the side without tape. Okay, so green to white, green to transparent. This one's obvious. Green to purple, but I should wet on wet. That's the one, that's how I'm going to differentiate it. This is the wet on wet one. Yeah, okay. Hey there everybody, it's voiceover MxRheyRhey. So this video was getting a little too long for me to be comfortable with, so there's going to be a part 2 coming up next week on the rest of this study. I wanted to thank you guys all for watching so far. If you want to see part 2, make sure to subscribe so you get notified when it's coming up. There are links to everything that I do off of YouTube in the description down below. That includes a Redbubble account, my Etsy shop, Instagram, my Patreon, anything that you think is something you all, well, okay, let me restart. Let me re-say that. Anything that you also are into would probably be seen down in the description below. I'm having so much trouble with my words today, excuse me. And if you want to check them out, I would really appreciate it. This all is something I want to do like as a career, and it would be really neat if you thought I am good at this enough to help support me. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the study so far, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd be happy to get back to you, and knowledge like this should be spread to everyone, so let's spread knowledge about art to everyone. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next week for part 2 of this gouache study. Have a wonderful life.